In this section, I will be explaining about the topic inter-process communication, and we will be seeing about the different ways by which the inter-process communication can take place. Now, why is there a need for this inter-process communication? That is, different process either in the same machine or in the different machine, they might need to communicate with each other, maybe to send some queries or to share its data, to share a file, or even to receive some responses, etc. So what do you mean by inter-process communication, or how can you define inter-process communication? It refers to a mechanism whereby which the operating system allows the different process to communicate with each other. Now, depending upon the degree of interaction, we can classify the process as an independent process or a cooperating process. So what is an independent process? They cannot affect or be affected by other process executing in the system. That is, these processes, they do not share anything among themselves, but they are going to share only the system resources. So they will be sharing the memory registers, etc. But the process as such do not share anything among themselves. And another process is a cooperating process. That is, they can affect or be affected by other process executing in the system. That is, the one process, they may be requiring the input from the other process to complete its execution. So they are sharing some information. That is a cooperating process. Why inter-process communication? That is, there are several reasons for providing an environment in which different processes can communicate with each other. So one is the information sharing. That is, several users, they may be interested in a single piece of information. For example, like a shared file. So if all the users have to get this information concurrently, we have to provide such an environment. So inter-process communication is necessary in that aspect. Another is about the computational speed up. That is, we are going to increase the speed of the system. That is by dividing the task into many subtasks, and we should allow all these tasks to be running concurrently in a system. Then modularity means that we are going to design a system based on separate modules, and later we are going to integrate it into a single entity. So the regarding from the perspective of modularity also, this IPC is required. Then for the convenience of the user, that is a user, he is going to do several tasks simultaneously. Okay, maybe the different processes are running on a system, and these processes need to cooperate with each other. For example, say a user is listening to the music, at the same time he may be typing a Word document. So all these are some of the process which he is doing. So all this process should run cooperatively, that is smoothly without any clashing. So for all these entities, inter-process communication is required. So inter-process communication refers to a mechanism where the operating systems allow various processes to communicate with each other. Two fundamental models of IPC are there, that is shared memory and message passing. Now shared memory, it is a model in which a region of memory is shared by cooperating process. That is, these are the two processes in this example, process A and process B. Both of them are cooperating process which is going to share a memory. So then the exchange of the information between the process is going to happen by the shared region. So process can exchange the information by reading and writing data into this particular shared region. That is a technique of shared memory. Now figure represents the shared memory communication. That means that here you can see an area of memory that is shared by more than one task. So this area of memory is allowed to be accessed by more than one process. Okay, and n process have access to a common area of memory, and shared memory communication is a very efficient and a fast technique. The only actions needed are the setting of this space that is being set by your operating system kernel and allowing the reading and writing operations which are relatively fast. So it is a very efficient way of inter-process communication. Here the figure depicts a shared memory communication in a bus-based system. So you can see in the figure that it is a bus-based system. So two components here, that is a CPU and the input-output device. they communicate to the shared memory location. And the software on the CPU, it is being designed to know the address of the shared location. Similarly, the shared location has also been loaded into the proper register of the I/O device. So how the communication occur between the CPU and I/O device is through the shared location. That is, the CPU, if it want to send a data to the I/O device, it first of all writes its data to the shared location, and the input output device is going to read it from the shared location. So there may be a flag in the shared location whose value will be 0 if the data is not ready, and it will be set to 1 if the data is ready. So once the CPU is going to write the data, the flag may be set from 0 to 1. So this is how the shared memory communication is going to take place in a bus-based system. Next is a message passing model. In this, the communication takes place by means of messages exchanged between the cooperating process. So if these are two cooperating process A and B, it does not have a shared location, but it is going to have a message passing mechanism. It means that the message is sent from the address space of the sender process to the address space of the receiver process. So the operating system kernel has got a memory location to which these two processes are going to communicate. So each communicating entity has its own message send or receive unit and mechanism to allow process to communicate and synchronize their action without sharing the same address space. It is particularly useful in the case of distributed environment. So as you can see in the figure, suppose if process A want to communicate to process B, it will first of all share its data to this set of location which is set by the kernel, and then the process B will take the corresponding data from the particular memory location. So it is sent from the message is sent from the address space of the sender process to the address space of the receiver process. That is the message passing method. Now in the message passing mechanism, there can be two ways. That is, it can be a point-to-point message passing as in the previous slide. From one process, it shares the data to another process, or even it can be broadcasting of messages from one process to another process. So that is called as the multicast or broadcasting of messages from one process to several other processes. Now for the message passing, the send and the receive formats are send destination message, receive source comma message. So this is the format for sending and receiving. That is, it means that the sender needs to know where the message is to be sent. That is, along with the message, it needs to know the destination address, and also the receiver should know the source of the message it receives, from which sender address it is receiving the message. So along with message, it should contain this information also. And the message size, it can be a fixed size or variable size, and a message basically consists of two parts, that is a header and the body. So the header part is used for storing the type of the message, the source ID, destination ID, what is the length, how many bytes of data is contained in that message, the control informations, etc. The control information will be containing the valid informations like what to do if it runs out of the buffer space, what is the sequence number, priority of that message, etc. So basically, along with the actual body, it will contain all this header and the control information. Now, we'll come to the section of different functions of inter-process communication. Now, the operating system provides the software programmer with the following IPC functions. So, these are the IPC functions, that is signals, semaphore, message queue, mailbox, pipes, socket, and remote procedure calls. Now, we have to see each and every one of them. So, first let us proceed to the signals. Now coming to the first IPC function, that is a signals. Signal is basically a notification sent to a process indicating the occurrence of an event. That is, they are basically a notification which we are sending to indicate maybe another process has to run. That is for asynchronous notification, where one process or thread fires a signal indicating the occurrence of a scenario which the other process or thread is waiting. Now you have studied in the interrupt, that is at the first stage it performs the FLISR, first level interrupt service routine, and then it is going to trigger a signal for the second level thread of the interrupt service routine. So that was called as the index service thread or the second level IST. So that is the concept of a signal. It is simple because itself it is not going to pass or share any data. It is simply going to send the signal itself. And it is analogous to an interrupt, but it is entirely a software creation. So signal, you have to understand that it is entirely a software creation. Now let us check some of the signal related IPC functions. They are signal handler, connect, signal, mask, unmask and ignore. So signal handler means that we have to identify the signal and provide a pointer. For that the signal handler is used. Corresponding to a signal, it has to identify a signal number and define a pointer to signal context. Next function is the connect. That is, with the help of the signal handler, we have got a signal number and a pointer. So we have to connect this interrupt vector to the signal number for the functioning of the signal. So the interrupt vector provides the program counter value for the signal handler function address. That is the specific address of the signal generation. And next function is the signal itself. That is similar to that of the interrupt service routine. If it has to begin a next thread of execution, it has to signal. So to send a signal identified by the number to a signal handler task, then if we require to mask a signal, there is a function for masking the signal. Similar to as we mask a hardware interrupt, there can be maskable interrupts as well as non-maskable interrupts. So similarly, a signal, it can be masked as well as unmasked. So these are the two functions for masking and for unmasking the signal. And also to ignore a signal, we can use the ignore function. So these are some of the signal related IPC functions. Now the operating system maintains two of these tables, that is a signal dispatch table and the signal mask table on the execution of a signal. That is, correspondingly, if a signal is being issued, there will be a mechanism of setting or a resetting a flag corresponding for each and every signal number n. So when a signal is being issued, a flag will be set and the flag will be reset when the service to that signal starts using the corresponding signal handler task. So that is a signal dispatch table, and there will be a signal mask table. That is, if in case a signal is being ignored in a situation in which the issuing of a signal has occurred and the signal handler has not got started, that is, we are able to mask the signal, then what happened, that will be stored in the signal mask table, and then the mask will be reset when the signal is serviced on issuing a signal function and the signal handler starts executing. So there will be setting and the resetting of the bits in the signal mask table. And the issuing of the signal, it is equivalent to setting a flag bit in a special function register in the process on the occurrence of a hardware interrupt. That is, if the signal is not masked by a signal mask, the signal allows execution of a signal handling function and allows the handler to run just as hardware interrupt allows the execution of an ISR. So its execution, signal execution, is basically similar to that of the interrupt service routine. But the only difference is understand that signal is going to be purely a software entity. The way it is being handled is just similar to that of a running of an interrupt service routine which is caused due to a hardware interrupt. So the operating system has to maintain both of these tables, that is signal dispatch table and the signal mask table, in order to know that whether it is currently processing a particular signal or what all signals are being currently masked and unmasked. It has to maintain both of these tables. A signal is generated by a process and transmitted to another process by the operating system. An important application is to handle the exceptions. That is, software interrupts which is being occurring. So exception is a process that is executed on a specific reported runtime condition. A signal reports an error which is called as exception during the running of a task and lets the scheduler initiate an error handling process of ISR. For example, like initiate the error login task. So we have seen about this concept of exception and the ISR etc. in the interrupt section. Now, similar to the hardware interrupt, that is which is having both maskable and non-maskable interrupt, the signal also performs in the same manner. The signal handler will handle the signal, that is it will start running its execution only if the signal is not being masked. And in the case if the IPC function for signal is not provided by operating system, then the operating system employs semaphore for the IPC function. So operating system has got many IPC function. So in case if signal is being masked or it cannot employ the signal for the IPC, it is going to employ semaphore for the same purpose. Now the process sending the signal, it uses a signal function and an integer number in the argument. That is, signal handler name is mostly implicit to the operating system from the signal number itself, or if not implicit, then it will be specified by the user. As we have seen, there are several functions like the signal handler, connect signal, etc., which is going to enable the operating system to know about which of the signal and the pointer, etc. And the signal can be issued in the following ways. That is, the operating system itself can issue an interrupt signal, or the process which is executing the function, it will send an interrupt signal to the operating system just like a hardware source sends an interrupt signal to the processor through the operating system. Now the signal sending, that concept means that it is execution of a software interrupt instruction, and a signal will be assigned a signal number by the operating system itself. So signal is treated just like a software interrupt instruction. Although the steps of executions are similar to that of a hardware interrupt, which is going to send a signal to a processor through the operating system, issuing of a signal means it will be like an execution of a software interrupt instruction. And the signal will be assigned the signal number by the operating system. Now the figure shows an example of the signal function execution. Suppose there are here 4 tasks shown, task A, B, C, D. Now all of these tasks need to communicate, intercommunicate with each other. Now these are communicating with the help of the signal. So signal function. So task A starts its execution, and while it is executing, maybe it requires some data, say from task B, or it needs to send a query, or there need to be a starting of the task B to execute again task A further. So at this instant, it is going to send a signal, say S1, to the task B. Now task B has to start at a particular time instance. Say at this point it is going to start its execution of task B, and while task B is executing, it is going to send another signal to start the execution of task C, and while task C is executing, it is going to send another signal S3 to start the execution of the task D. So this is an example of how the signal function itself is used to send not a particular data, but itself it is a signal indicating that some another task needs to be started, or it needs to access some information from another task. So signal is that simple, that is it is a simple way of inter-process communication. Now coming to the last slide of the signal, the advantage of using a signal is because it takes the shortest possible CPU time. Drawback is it is handled only by a very high priority process, that is it may disrupt the usual schedule and usual priority inheritance mechanism. So it is going to be, a process is going to be getting disrupted in between. So the usual schedule is being disrupted, and it may cause a re-entrancy problem. Not necessary, it may cause a re-entrancy problem. That is, process may not be able to return to a state identical to the one before the signal handler process has been executed. So these are some of the drawbacks, and this is the advantage of using a signal. Now in this section I have explained about why IPC, inter-process communication, is necessary, and the two basic mechanism of IPC, that is shared memory and message passing, the concept of both of them with the figure, and we have discussed about the first type of the IPC function, that is in the signal. In the subsequent section I will be explaining about the other types of IPC function.